pleasure to welcome everyone to our first lecture of the series, This, Not That. My name's Heather Roberge. I'm the chair of UCLA's Department of Architecture and Urban Design. And an ambition of mine is to have the room this full in May, as it is tonight. Thank you all for coming. So the series that is being kicked off tonight is a series that curates a series of architects, urban thinkers, landscape architects around the series title, This, Not That, which means we're asking various creative practitioners to come to the school and to lay out their positions, the positions or stances around which they develop and frame their creative practice. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sue Fujimoto, our first lecturer tonight. He's an internationally recognized, young, still considered young architect with a practice based both in Tokyo and Paris. His practice was established not even 2 decades ago in 2000 and is currently developing significant projects quite far from home. So a quick look at his Instagram posts from the last year reveal regular travels to France, where he has major projects in Paris and Montpellier. He's built an impressive number of award-winning projects in Japan, including houses that many of you must know well. House In A, The Final Wooden House, among others. I'd like to use 3 projects to reflect on his work, as each reveals a design approach that expands architecture's potential by transforming the familiar into something curious and surprisingly new. In the 7-2 house in Hokkaido of 2006, he linearly arrays 7 gable forms connecting valley to valley. Rather than question this primitive domestic form, he abstracts and multiplies it, defining rooms below that slip across the boundaries typically drawn under a single gable-topped structure. The form is familiar, but our relationship to it is unconventional. The resulting spaces explore the gable form as repetitive abstraction, with each room revealing a new relationship to the peaks and valleys above. In his Serpentine Gallery of 2013, he produces a 3-dimensional array or matrix of lightweight cloud-like bricks. Here, the primitive operates at the scale of furniture and spaces from the intimate to the collective. This kind of primitive or abstract form, then, allows him to make a relationship that spans from the body to the group to the park beyond. And the third project that I know quite well in hosting you for a workshop here at UCLA a number of years ago is Architecture is Everywhere, which was the subject of a really playful and engaging exhibit where a series of ready-mades were placed on an array of pedestals, and each one was given a particular scaled human object in order to establish the scale at which one might rethink that familiar form, whether it be a pile of lettuce or a hairbrush or an array of familiar childlike blocks. So in all of Sue Fujimoto's work, as characterized in these 3 projects, there's an open exploration and a curiosity about how we might re-see in familiar things the potential of these things to establish architectural ideas. This is quite distinct from how we might speak about architectural projects from inside the American Academy. We stake a claim, we translate the claim as material or representational fact, and then we draw kind of hard and firm conclusions. those design investigations are different. They actually engage participants in the act of discovery and assigning architectural significance to things that are not closed or completely defined. And it's that kind of playful act that allows us as your fans to recognize your great contribution, to see architectural potential in things we thought we knew. So it's my pleasure. Let's all welcome Sue Fujimoto.
Good evening, hi. I'm very happy to come back here again because the first time was almost 10 years ago, invited by Hitoshi Abe-san to join to the workshop together with several Japanese architects. And at that time, I couldn't speak English so much, and the first time to be in abroad to join to the workshop. So it was like a kind of a tricky challenges, and then after that, of course, I came back here several times, many times. So it's like one of my home, and it's really happy to be here again. And I did a lecture at the Monterey last Saturday, and so I changed the PowerPoint a little bit, not to repeat so much the same things. Normally I repeat the same things and same jokes again and again. But today I try to do a little bit different. And but anyway, the first things is I like to talk about my background. This is my background. I was born in Hokkaido. It's the northern island of Japan. It's not a countryside or nature field. So I was grown up in those kind of a nature field, playing around in the forest, and yeah, like that. And then, when I get into the university, I moved to Tokyo. So as you can see, it's like almost opposite things, completely opposite situations. Super ugly city, in a sense. But after learning architecture, I found out there are some kind of nice similarities behind it. Of course, appearance is quite different, but in the forest and in the Tokyo situation, especially in those kind of small pathways, you feel, on both situations, you feel you're protected by such many small trees or branches or leaves, or many small, such as bicycles or signage or some trashes or something like that. So you are protected by many, many small things. And still in the forest, you can choose your own way. So it's open to you. And in Tokyo, it's also quite open to you. You can choose your own way to move around as you like. So in both situations, you are rather protected by many small pieces, like architectural spaces. And still, it is not a closed space. It's an open field. You can walk around. So that's kind of the reason of comfortable feelings, I thought. And then, looks so different, but some kind of similar structures behind it. It's quite interesting things for me. Between nature and architecture, you can find something similar. So after that, I thought about, wow, of course I'm designing architecture, but behind the architectural thinkings, you can also see the nature things as a similar structures. Then you can find nature and architecture sometimes could be dealing to similar things, or dealing as the same things, or mix them together, or melting them together, or inversing them together. So those kind of a treatment is possible, I thought. That was the very, very starting point of my architecture thinking. And then, so for example, this street and the forest. This is the garden of my home. And then street. Looks so different, but you can feel some kind of a similarity. Yeah, it's like a small pathway going through the trees, and a small pathway going through many things. And then at this time today, I'd like to show three rather like a alley project I did almost 20 years ago. It's a bit like a strange feelings to show those kind of young proposals, but it's nice to share those basic ideas, and then I like to show how I developed those ideas step by step by the projects, and then finally reach to the current situations. And especially the inspiration of the Tokyo was like a big influences, big inspirations for me at the time, because it was new things for me. I moved from Hokkaido to Tokyo. New situations gave big inspirations to you. And this is the proposals to understand the whole city as a house. So try to propose some new way of living or new definition of the house. And this is a map of the Tokyo, almost where I was living there, around the Shinjuku area in Tokyo. And then you can see some dots of different colors. And each dot shows the small rooms, small box. It's so small, for example, 1 by 2 meter or something, box for sleeping, or box for the bathrooms, or box for just a study or something like that. And then I placed those boxes scattered throughout the whole city. And then you just walk around and stop by some of your box, stay there, or stop by some of your the cafe, or so not only using these boxes, but the urban facilities you can also use as part of the house, your house. So extend the definition of the house from the enclosed box to open to the city, and then walking experiences, walking activity itself is part of the city, or recreating the definition of the cities. So this is one of the areas. You can see the plan. It's so those. This is, for example, just the dining tables or sofas, bathrooms, or something like that. And those red line is the way. Of course, you can choose whatever kind of a different way, but walking activities connect the whole the scattered boxes, and not only the scattered box, but the convenience stores or the cafes or the public bath or some other things. So in here, I try to reconstruct or redefine what is a house, or what is a city, or what is such a blurring boundaries between the city and house. And from that ages, I have been doing those kind of re-questioning, rethinking about fundamental things. What is a house, or what is the meaning of the functions, or what is the meaning of the walking in the cities, integrated into the architectural thinking. Because normally the walking itself is not the part of the architecture, but if you expand the house into the city, then your physical movement itself is part of the architecture, or something like that. So those kind of quite conceptual, but at the same time quite realistic thinkings, because this is the place I was living there after the graduation, and I didn't have any, of course, commissions. I didn't have anything to do. So I was just thinking, or I was just walking around. So it's really related to my life at that time, but at the same time it's quite conceptual thinking. Then this is the first project. It was like re-understanding the city of Tokyo. And this is another proposals. At that time, I was also interested in the boundaries, because the boundaries is one of the most fundamental things for architecture, to make a walls, to make a space for architecture. So how to do with the boundary was like interesting topics. And also the experience in Tokyo was affecting me also for this, because in Hokkaido it's a really cold place. In the winter time it's getting minus 20 degrees or something Celsius, something like that. So the boundaries between inside and outside is really strongly divided. Otherwise you will die. But in Tokyo, the weather is rather warm, so the boundary is rather loose in a sense. And then I was living in such a small rooms of the 13 square meter one space, so it's quite small. And then when you open the door, you get out to the corridor. The width of the corridor is around 1.5 meter, So not so different from the width of my house. And then going down to the street, the width of the street is 2 meters. So again, it's not so different. So inside of your house, the width of the room is around 2.2 meters, and then on the street, the width is 2 meters. So it's almost the same dimensions you are around, walking around. So between inside and outside, you don't see so much big differences. That was interesting for me. And then I tried to create some kind of a model of blurring boundaries. Then finally, those kind of a gradation concept came out. This is, you see, this is a wall. This is not the CAD drawing. This is a hand drawings I did at the time. And so layering of these kind of walls, I was intending to be the translucent glass. So inside of these glass walls, you have another glass wall, territories, and then more inside, another glass walls and glass walls. And then out of this glass wall, you have many, many other areas surrounded by the glass, translucent glass walls. It means more and more deep inside, you will be more like getting more opaque and protected. And at that time, I was thinking the most private area is the bathroom toilet. So this is the mark of the toilet to put the toilet in the middle. But anyway, those kind of very, very private areas, the most private areas, a little bit more private areas, gradually open up to the outside. And then it is interesting to see where is the different boundaries of your house. For example, it seems could be one of the boundaries of the house, but you can say this is only part of your house, one room, and another room, it's possible. So you don't see definite boundaries of your house. Everything is continuous. Getting more and more within the many layers of the boundaries, translucent glass, your territory is getting more private. But if you come out again and again and again, then it is getting more, open, shared with somebody. So we can say this is part of the city, or this is part of the living spaces, or something like that. So this is possible to extend it to infinitely. So the whole city or whole world could be described by this, I thought. So this is quite again, conceptual, but at the same time it's quite realistic, starting from the realistic perceptions. And also this is relating to the Japanese traditional in-between spaces too. We have here those kind of in-between spaces for the Japanese traditional architectures. So how to translate or retranslate those kind of traditional things into the contemporary way is relating to this concept. So anyway, this is quite conceptual early hand drawings, but relating to fundamental things. And then the last thing is, this is not Tokyo, it's in Vietnam, but this is Asia, in a sense, chaos. This is a market. So they are selling every of those things, but she, in the middle of this many things, she doesn't seem she likes to sell anything. She's just But it's quite interesting because even in such a marketplace, surrounded by many of items for sales, she created or she found out her own comfortable sleeping spaces. So it is like the interactions between your human body and the space around you, and how to perceive, how to understand the place relating to your body could define your behaviors or the functions in it. So you don't see any functions in it, but actually she's sleeping in there. Then we have to say, well, this might be the sleeping space for her, or some other things. So the function is always changing, depends on how you, perceive the space, or how you interact with the spaces. So that was one of the inspirations. And this is like the opposite situations. Functions is really defined by these kind of plates, clearly defined, and then you can put the clear functions on it. So mechanical functions and organic functions. So I try to, of course, I love local visual very much. So I like to integrate those kind of a chaotic situation and super clear, pure form-like situations together. And finally, I invented those kind of crazy compositions. Many, many plates. In that sense, it is like influenced by the local visual systems. But so many plates with a 35 centimeter gap, so that you can sit on, as you can see, or you can use it as like tables, double size 70 centimeters, or you can use it as like shelves or staircases or something like that. So there are many, many steps, but no specific functions in it. But if you get closer to that, then you will find how to use it or how you like to interact with it. So in that sense, this could allow people to interact as you like. So allowing the chaos, but by such kind of an ordered gap of 35 centimeters. So this is kind of a, for me, the personal integration of local visuals, pure systems and the chaotic agent situations. And also there are integration with the furniture scales and architecture scales and possibly the landscape scales. So try to integrate in such kind of things. Or try to re-question what is, for example, what is the furniture in the room? It's normal things to have chairs in the rooms, but is it normal things? Or we should have a functions, but what is the functions? So those kind of re-questioning, rethinking about it could, how to say, enables us to think about those strange ideas, but push us towards the future. And then, after those kind of conceptual thinkings, I got a small chance to realize one small project in Japan. It was a competition to create some kind of a wooden house. And then I read all the briefs, and then at the last sentence they said all the materials could be given by the clients, because the client is like a timber industrial company, so they can provide the whole materials, but the whole budget is limited. So limited budget plus you have the amount of the timbers. Then I thought, wow, it could be nice or better to use more and more amount of the timber materials. Then you can get more, how to say, from the clients for free. That was the starting point. Then I started to think about how to use such a big amount of the timbers to create the architectural spaces. And then finally we thought, huge solid blocks of the timbers, stacking them up to create like a cave-like spaces. And then of course combined together with the previous project, 35 centimeter steps, replaced by such a blocks of the timbers. It's like this. So the whole structures is made by the stacked timbers. 35 by 35 is quite huge and heavy. And then it's finally 14 levels or something. And of course, it's structurally it should be good balances to create such a spaces inside. But it's, yeah, of course it's possible because more amount of the timbers than the amount of the space. And again, this is the same concept, to create rather like spaces for the people, but not specific like a floor areas, not specific functions, more like just many steps where you can choose as you like. And then finally it's built. It's reduced, shrinked a little bit, because even using such a big amount of the timbers, it's too much for the clients. So they request to make it a little bit shrinked. So minimal size, it's about 4 meter by 4 meter by 4 meter cubes. And it is quite small, but it has like you can see the glass walls, and it has doors, and it has a small kitchens and bathrooms, so like a house, small house, like a small cottage. And it was a competition, but it was lucky for me because the head of the jury was Toyohito. And he's, as you know, he's a crazy guy. To choose this is as a first prize. And so it was the open like the competition is open presentation and open discussion to decide the first prize. And of course the jury members, not only the Toyo-Ito, but the Toyo-Ito and some other architects, and the head of the client was there. And the head of the clients, the head of the company, timber company, was against until the end of the competition jury sessions. But the Toyo-Ito says, wow, you should make it. This is quite crazy and interesting. And finally, Ito-san persuaded the clients to accept it. And it's done. And you can see it is like this. And at that time, we had those kind of nice atmospheres which allow younger generations to do such an experimental architectural designs. Even in such a small scales, the realizations, the concept phase and the realizations was very, very important. And so I was lucky to be part of that. And of course I learned a lot about water leakings and installations and many, many things. You can see there are places for people to sleep, minimal spaces, and some kitchens below. And under these timbers we have bathrooms, and then many small places for people to like sit on or some come together around. So this is small space, but around 10 people could be there. So crowded, but so comfortably, because 10 more different levels. You can lay out yourselves in your own ways. And it is like a kind of interesting interactions of the space and body, because no clean flat floors. You have to move around with your hand, not only by your foot, but with your hand. So it's like you feel you are like animals moving around. So it's more like a primitive relationships of the body and space. Then, private house in Tokyo. You can see the similarities and the differences. This is in Tokyo. It's a real house, but it's quite small. It's 6 meter wide and 7 meter, 8 meter depth of the site. It's a typical size of the site in Tokyo. And of course, we didn't propose this from the scratch. We started to talk with the client. We have been developing those kind of ideas of many, many steps, but we didn't like to, bring such an ideas from the very, very beginning to the client, because it is, for me, it's more interesting to see some new inspirations from the local situations, and then get a new ideas integrating with the previous ideas to develop the idea itself. So every time the basic ideas we have, but the unexpected situations or surprising way of living or surprising smallness of the site make you develop basic ideas unexpectedly. And then finally you find out something new for me. And in this case, the smallness was one of the big topic, because of course this one is much smaller, but for the normal house, this is quite small. And then we talked about with the client how to do the smallness. And then they said, at that time they were living in the normal apartment house, and then it means living spaces, kitchen, and dining space, and the bedrooms or something. But they said they are not living following to those kind of a name of the rooms. They more rather find one corner of the dining spaces to do reading books, or the another corners of the bedrooms could be the space for the computers, something like that. So the definition of the functionality, bedrooms, dining spaces, doesn't have any meanings for them. They are more like a free to move around the house and finding the different corners, different places for their life. They talked about those kind of story without any intention. They just casually talk, we just casually talk about it. But I thought it's quite interesting things. Then, of course, we have to give up the size of the space, but we don't have to give up the numbers of the spaces or the variations of the diversities of the spaces. If you divide the site in smaller pieces like this, and then we can achieve 20 more different areas with the different levels. finally, the smallest part plate is 1.4 by 1.4 meters, so it's almost like the size of a small table. And the biggest, even the biggest one is 2.5 by 2.5 meters, so it's like larger tables. So all of the plates is like the size of the furniture, and stack them up at various different levels, like this. And then this level is, of course, quite important to create the relationships of two different levels. One of them could be the floor, and then other one should be the, for example, the tables, or benches, or shelves, or part of the stairs, or something like that. So we carefully, of course, design the gaps of these plates. And some of them, we couldn't say every space is like the roof. But for example, this space, can you see? Laser pointer is now. This space is almost like a 80 centimeter height of the ceiling. So it's not the rooms in the normal meanings. But you can just come into the space, sitting inside, to, for example, read some books, or to be more isolated, or something like that, even in such a transparent spaces, because of the scales. And then you were surrounded by many, many small pieces again. So it is the place where you can choose your own places, where to locate, or where to do anything, or where to move around. 20 more different spaces for your choice. To create such kind of varieties in your life is, I think, kind of the different types of the richness beyond the normal meaning of the functions. And again, I'd like to go back to these photos. This is in the middle of the Tokyo, even made by such a white, clean plate. It is really relating to the structures behind the city of Tokyo. Many, many small things are floating around you to create a temple. But in this case, you don't have many choices three-dimensionally on the street. But in our case, you're going to use three-dimensionally the whole spaces. So is this more like the living in the trees or living in the forest, like monkeys, from one branches to the other branches, like jumping around to meet with some of your friends or your partners or something like that. And even if you have 10 friends, actually they have sometimes such a many friends, then each plate, each people, persons, to lay out three-dimensionally. So it's like an exhibition of the persons. And then still you can make a chat between the spaces. So those kind of a restructuring of your life, or restructuring of the functions has been done in this house. So again, it is the real house for the one young couples, but then questioning fundamentally, what is the richness of the life? Not the size of the, if you couldn't have a big size of the house, then what is the richness of the life? And then the diversities or the variations of your choice could be one of them. And then those kind of a house is possible. And then it is touching to the fundamental values of the living environment, I think. And then crossovering from the city of Tokyo and then the small forest. Then finally reach to this pavilion. You can see now those kind of integrations or development of the ideas have been reaching to this. But actual process was not so simple, not so easy, because this is a pavilion and it is 200 square meter size in the middle of the park. The main program was cafe and the public spaces. So the situation is so different. So I didn't think doing those kind of continuous updates from our architecture thinkings in this pavilions at the very, very beginnings. I just like to think something new or something from the 0 point based on those kind of pavilion programs in this park. Finally, we made it like by 2 centimeter really thin structure pipes, steel pipes, making the grids of 40 centimeters, sometimes double size of the 80 centimeters. Of course, the previous one is 35 centimeters, now the 40 centimeters, because finally I thought the British people is bigger than the Japanese people. And of course, because of the price. If you have more smaller grids, then you have more junctions, and then the price is much, much higher, almost getting double. So we found a good reason to make it bigger. But anyway, this is just everything is like a pure grid. So from the previous many steps houses or stuck timber houses, it is getting much more pure in a sense, too pure. And compared to the house NA, the steps houses, it's more like a purely conceptual. But at the same time, it is quite like physical in a sense. We put the glass plates on the bottom of the plates, so it is three-dimensionally walking up, climbing around, and so on. And even the outside, you can climbing up. And in the process, it was like a funny things, because we had only 1 month to make a concept, because in total we only have 6 months from the very beginning to the finish of the pavilion. So we only have 1 month. We have to decide the concept. It was too short for us, because it was a great chance for us to think about the Serpentine pavilions. But every week we have to send the sketches. The first week we only have 1 week. We made many sketches, then send it to them, and then we have to make a phone conference right after that. And at that time, the director of the Serpentine Gallery was Julia Payton-Jones. She's a quite strong woman. Now we are very good friends. It's like the mother and son, or sister and brother, or something like that. But now it's like that. But at that time, it was like a tough relationships. And I sent her many sketches to them and make a phone calls. And then she just screamed, said, no, this is not the Serpentine Pavilion. And I don't understand what it is, or why she gets so angry. So I asked her, why, what's wrong? And then she said, this is too much Fujimoto-like things. And okay, you are appointed to Fujimoto, but you don't like Fujimoto-like things. Okay, so I will try something different. Next week, I made many sketches and sent it to them. And of course, made another phone calls. And then again, she said she gets angry, and she said, no, this is not, you don't understand anything. I asked her, why, what's wrong? And then she said, this is too much not the Fujimoto-like things. And okay, so you don't like Fujimoto, and you don't like not Fujimoto, so maybe something between Fujimoto and not Fujimoto could be the one. But actually, as you can see, final one is of course really Fujimoto-like things, but something beyond that. And the sketches I sent is not like the final one. It's more like just like the repetition of the previous projects, exactly, or something like that. And of course they don't like it. But they don't like just a copy of the former works, but they like to have some kind of consistencies or development of the concept. So that was a quite like a critical, important point. And of course, I understand it is quite important, because you have to, every time you have to develop yourselves. But on the other hand, you couldn't bring something really different from some other places to say this is I thought. So finally, I think we made like a nice, like a consistency and a nice jump from the previous works. But the other things is, after such kind of discussions, we thought about more like a going back. We don't care so much about Fujimoto or not Fujimoto, but we like the based on the situations. The open park, public spaces. So I like to create a place for people to behave variously as they like, and something beyond their normal behaviors. So at the beginning we thought about such kind of landscape-like places, like this. Looks like a bit Frank Gehry, but you don't have to care so much about it. At the beginning, could be Frank Gehry or could be any OMI or something like that as a starting point. But anyway, the landscape-like things could allow people to sit on or to lying on or walk around, so providing such kind of a variety of behaviors. But on the other hand, if he makes those kind of continuous surfaces, it is blocking the view to the surroundings, dividing this side and that side too strongly. That was pity for me. Then the ideas of the transparent landscape came out. Landscape made by such kind of meshes or grids, which allow people still playing around on it. But the interactions between inside and outside, or from this side and the other side, could be much more, how to say, transparent. That was the ideas to step into this project. And of course, we thought about our previous project, but I thought it is nice like a development from the 35 centimeter, many steps, or from the solid wooden blocks, or from the many steps, transparent houses, to use more conceptual, pure grid structures to make it more like, how to say, super conceptual, but at the same time super physical existence. And then those kind of densities or translucencies, transition of the translucencies by the densities has been attracting me so much. So that is why I think it is something, the one we have to make it. Those kind of, how to say, you can see the super repetition of those kind of same things to create. The structure itself is quite transparent, but the perceptions or impressions or space itself is some part is quite dense and opaque, and some part is getting really transparent. And if you move around inside, then the perception or depth from your point to the outside is changing. So finally, the feeling is like you're walking around in the cloud, and always the whole structure is always moving around. Anyway, it's excellent. After a lot of the discussions and a lot of the challenges of the structures and then the constructions, because the welding has been very tough. Then you can see it is, from outside, it's like a small mountains or small hills, and people can walk up. But of course, we should have the barriers to block the people, not climbing up on the top. So those kind of security, safety things also well integrated into this buildings. And inside, you can see, also even inside we have steps, because it is like a landscape coming from inside and going up to make a roof, and then touching down to the other side. So those kind of continuity of the surfaces are still there, but translated into the thick repetition of the mesh structures. And then you will see how people could find their own space. This is rather like a still empty situation, but people can find their own places. And then you will see how the transparency is changing around. Walking up, crowded. Even in such a crowded situations, people, I don't know how to say, such a crowded situation or such an empty situations, every time the meaning of the space is different. And then morning time, afternoon, the situation is always changing. So the period during the opening period, I've been there many times, and then every time people behave in a different way depending on the situations. And then it means the space is simple and rather like a one space, but the meaning and the function of the space is always different. Depends on how crowded, or depends on how sunny or how cloudy or how rainy it is. So there is no functions in a sense, just an open field. But if you are there, you can find thousands of different functions on it. That is kind of the varieties and diversities of the spaces. And finally, you can find the beautiful integrations of many more different things. The straightness and softness, or 90 degrees and steel structures, such kind of artificial orders, and then the complexity of the natural orders, and then the furniture scales, tiny 2 centimeter scales, furniture scales, architecture scales, landscape scales. Those kind of integration of those different scales are also realized. And of course, inside and outside, very basic contrast and integrations are realized. So in this project, finally, we reached to the point where we can redefine almost everything relating to the architectures. No floor plates, no walls, no ceilings, but everything is made by the one things, repetition of the one things. But then, which is integrating everything. And those kind of experimental rethinking process is the key for our architectural development. Not only in those kind of experimental small things, but even in such bigger things, we can continue to do those kind of rethinking process. And this is one of the symbolic realization of rethinking everything. And after this project, we had a chance to do such a huge things, expanding situations. And every time, of course, you have again the core concept, but every time you encounter with such an unexpected situations or new situations, you can develop your own thinkings beyond your understandings in a sense. And this is the project in the Middle East, and the length of the site is almost like 1.2 kilometers. It's quite a huge site for the shopping centers. And I was really excited because Middle East, so they must have money, so could realize any kind of things. And such a huge size, I never did. So what happens from my side? And shopping center, I never did, but could be interesting. So finally we proposed, at first we proposed those kind of 7, 8 towers because the site is so flat in the middle of the desert. So like a landmark, it would be nice to have a landmark. But this is not only the landmark as an object, but it has a huge void inside like this to make the natural vegetations from the bottom, cool airs, to going up, the hot air is going up. So the landmark, but at the same time it is like a natural vegetation systems. And then this is a void inside. It's nice, of course, to have such an atrium in the shopping areas. But the most interesting and exciting point of this is the structure systems. This is, as you can see, many repetitions with the arches, the circular shapes to create the whole structures, and which could work as a sunshade against this kind of strong sunlight in the Middle East. So the glass line is set back from the outside. Then inside you can see many filtering structures blocking the sunlight, but still bringing the proper beautiful sunlight coming in. So those whole structures systems is making, of course, structure itself, and then filtering the sunlight, huge void and landmark, and of course the experience of the shopping. So all of those kind of things are well integrated into this kind of architectural forms. That is why we are so excited. And as you can see, this is, in a sense, as a structure system, almost the same as the Serpentine Pavilions, the repetition of the grids. If you don't think about the shape of the arch, then everything is like the repetition with the grids. Sometimes the double grids or the triple grids, but everything is made by the grid. And of course, the whole shape, Serpentine case is like a cloud, and in this case, it's more like the many peaks of the towers. But of course, the outer shape could be more flexible. So the systems behind it is the same, but the scale is quite different. That is the things I didn't expect. Of course, when we did the Serpentine, that kind of smallness of the grids was very important, because it fits to your furniture scales, it fits human bodies and interactions. But if you think about 1.2 kilometers, then you can be more, brave enough to forget about the original concept, to expand it, to see what it is in a sense. And then finally we thought, well, this is similar to the Serpentine, but different from the Serpentine, and could be something interesting because it's beautiful. And then we thought about, because they have money, we thought, we can make a lake in the middle of the shopping center to put the boat, to do those kind of a crazy way of the shopping is possible in the Middle East. And the beautiful sunlight is coming down. So we were just enjoying to expand our ideas, to be involved in such unknown situations. And yeah, it is quite like a beautiful translucent towers in a sense. But finally, after submitting the 28 panels and starts to talk about the date of the presentations, we got one email, simply says, this competition is cancelled. And everything stopped. No payment, no anything, no winner, no loser, just stopped. Of course, it could happen in the architectural society, but it's pity. But still, it's nice. It was a nice experience for me to be involved in such kind of unknown, unexpected situations, new cultural background, new climate conditions, new size, new programs, and then all of them, how to say, inspire us to be something beyond or somewhere else we never expected. And this is, every time it's nice to see we are somewhere else. And we found out this is still has a continuity from our previous thinkings, but completely new dimensions, and could have some potentials to be developed more. And also, this was already 4 years ago, I'm always showing this project in the lectures in abroad, because some of you will be interested in it. And some of you have money. So if you or you are rich family to be interested in it, please just let me know to realize such an amazing historical works. And then this is one of the latest works. Housing towers in south of France, Montpellier. I don't know, this has kind of the conceptual relationships to the previous ones, but again, those kind of many things, and after making those kind of crazy things, I'm not afraid of anything, so I have a freedom to do it. But this is again, I met with the different culture, different climate, a different lifestyle. And then those kind of inspirations make me think about something new for me. This is Montpellier is a small city, Mediterranean city, not small, but a city, Mediterranean city. So their climate is quite nice, like here in California. And even in the winter time, they have a lunch outside on the terraces. So for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, they have been doing those kind of lifestyle to enjoy outdoor. So the competition brief was to make a 50-meter high tower. So how to make their life or their traditional lifestyles could be integrated into such a contemporary high-rise buildings. And then the solution is quite simple to have such a huge balconies on it. More than 200 balconies and the 100 pergolas are on it. So like this. The biggest one is 8 meter by 6 meters, so it's quite huge things. And then many lives are happening. The shape of the building is those kind of round shape because of the site conditions. We have a river and we have a green alongside the river, so we like to keep continuing the greens even throughout our site. So this is our site. The red dot is our site, and then the greens is continuing. So we push the buildings more like to the roundabout areas. And then we also like to keep the view from the building above. So that is why we push the one side of the buildings as it's pushed in, and then the other side. Finally, we have those kind of round shape, strange round shape. And this is the reason why our building looks like more organic, not like the normal housing block of the rectangular shaped buildings. So in a sense, the housing volumes and balconies are like quite typical typologies of the apartment house. But if you have the unique shape of the volumes and such a huge size of the balconies all around the whole buildings, then such a basic things change to something new. Then those kind of a pineapple or pine cone or some things could happen. But it is like basics, but quite something new. And some of the apartment has 2-3 balconies. And duplex, we have a duplex, 2-level apartment, and then 2-level huge balconies connected by the staircases. So it is like the sky staircases, 2-level balconies, really, really huge living space on the sky. Please. And now we have the construction process. The building core or the volumes are almost finished, like this. But of course, doesn't have any balconies yet, wearing nothing yet. And then from the end of this month, we started with the balconies, from the top to the end. Then we'll be finished in 1 year more. This is the mock-up for the balconies. To see, of course, the structural test, but the details test and the finishing test we did. So like this. And then I'm really looking forward to see, of course, the finished building also, but more interesting for me is to have the light coming out on the balconies. Because the beautiful, of course, building itself is beautiful, but the light, when the light is coming out, you have a parasols or colorful furnitures or strange somethings, all of them are coming out to cover all the buildings, to create like a three-dimensional vertical layers of the lives. It's so amazing, I think. So the architecture in here is like a platforms which allow such kind of beautiful lives in the skies. And then the foundation of the whole life is really must be very beautiful. There's a 50-meter high stacked life that could happen. So I really, really love to see. From this starting point, this was the topic about the boundaries. And I had a chance after years and years to realize the private house relating to the boundaries. And in here it's a box in box in box. So only 3 layers, and it's box in box in box. And then it has many, many openings. And the big box has openings without the glass. So the rain comes in and the wind blows. So we have a trees inside because it's a garden outside. So it's a bit confusing situation. Inside of the big box is still outside. And then middle box, it has a glass. So it's actual boundaries, but still we have a small house inside. So it's like inside of the middle box, it's still out of the small box. Or out of the outside of the middle box is inside of the big box, but actually outside, or something like that. So it's quite like intentionally confusing situations between inside and outside, because we thought definite boundaries is a little bit sad. This is in between spaces. We have a trees, this is outside. But as you can see, this is really enclosed by the big box. This is a diagram to show left hand is normal wall, divide inside and outside. It is a bit sad because it's only 2 choices. On the right hand, we have a gradations. Then we can have more choice. Deeper inside, you can be more private. And then outside, you can be more open. But in between, in the middle, you can have various different situations between inside and outside. So again, I like to create such kind of more choices, more varieties for your life. Then your life could be more rich, I think. So the gradation concept is related to the richness of the life. And then blurring the boundaries is not only the architectural interest, but try to create how to make the rich choices in your life. But of course, translation from such a gradations concept to here should be done, how to say, in a sense, it was a jump, because I had the previous ideas of the layering ideas, has been done 10 years ago. But then, to realize those kind of box in box in box, not only in the plan, but even in the sections, was like a big jump for me. And every time those kind of small occasions, the actual site, actual clients, make me think more about it, and finally stepping forward, a little bit more. And in this case, those kind of three-dimensional layerings was like a small jump, because as you can see, this is the situations. All surroundings is like a typical Japanese house. And the front house, from this our house, and the garden in front. So this is like a typical situation. And the previous house from our site, the house before the new house, from our client's house, was almost the same, house and the garden. And in a sense, we just put the bigger box covering the house and garden situations to make house and garden as a house. So it's like a changing the definition of the just a normal house and gardens by the spatial strategies. And this is the view from the inside of the big box. So it's inside, but still outside. Rain comes in, and then you can see the second box. This is a view from the smallest box. So you see small box, openings, and middle box, openings, then the big box, a little bit fragmented, and openings and the skies. Then you will see, as I said, three-dimensionally it is layered. And then this is fascinating because you can see sky fragmented, covering you. So it's quite like open feelings. But at the same time, you are in the middle of the three layers of the concrete boxes, so it's really, really protected feelings. So those kind of coexistence of openness and protected feelings are together in here. And this is making, like, again, the gradation from super openness to the protected feelings. And in reality, you can find each different corners, because we have many, many windows. You can find each different corners to be more protected or to be more open. So you not only the three layers, three choices, but you have a lot of more choices. More gradations are created by those kind of layered windows, layered windows. And again, this is like an iconic view of the gardens to show the in-between spaces. And of course, as I said, this is like a retranslation of the Japanese traditional in-between spaces, like Engawa spaces, but in a contemporary way. And not only just to make the Engawas, but we're covering it by the big box to create a new space in your house. And then, also, this is also relating to the boundaries, but it's more in a funny way. This is a public toilet in Tokyo, not in Japan, 1 hour from Tokyo. And the commission was just make such a small public toilet. I got a phone call. And I just said, yes, I like to do it, because I have been interested in designing a public toilet from a long time ago. Because, seriously, because it is quite fundamental programs in architecture design, because it's public. But if you are inside, it's really private. So something between super public and super private. Now, how to do with those kind of things? Yeah, it's quite like there's also what's that? Public-private. And it's the
see. But at the same time, you should be protected from the view. So you like to see it, but you don't like to be seen. This is quite fundamental architecture topics. How to close it and how to open it. And also nature and architecture is here. So those kind of a contradiction of situations is quite, every time is quite exciting. And it needs like architectural inventions. And finally, it's simple, it's funny, but it's quite intellectual architectural invention, I believe. This is it. You can see glass box as a toilet, and then the black walls. It's like oval shape. And the left above, it's that also. We have doors left above. And once you come into this garden, then you can lock the door from inside. Once you lock the door, this oval garden is like your private gardens, and you can be more, relax and behave as you like. And the interesting point is, this has two different types of the wall. One is a glass wall, transparent wall, and another one is the black wall, opaque walls. And black wall is blocking the view, but not blocking the air. And the glass wall is not blocking the view, but blocking the air. It's a bit confusing, but that is why we can have the openness from the toilet, but still protected by black walls, and still enjoying the beautiful gardens around it. So those kind of how to say, carefully dividing the meaning of the wall, visible but blocking the air walls like a glass walls, and invisible but not blocking the air like a black walls. Combination of those two different types of the walls with the proper distance is making this funny toilet. This is the plan, and you can see it's quite simple, and it works very well. Of course, in the emergency situations, maybe you might be in trouble because, finally you reach to the door, you open the door, and then you will find another 15 meters to run. So sorry for that kind of situations. Everything is quite like a simply made, and we kept the existing trees, and the garden itself is just a green grass, so it's kind of could be quite natural situations, because I like to make such kind of unexpected situations. Open the door, and then the normal green grass and the normal trees is there. Oh, thank you. Okay. And actually, the funny story, I don't have much time, but I like to talk about the funny story of this. Because this is finally, it's done, it's finished, and it gets famous. And finally, many tourists coming to here by using big bus to see it. Not only one bus, but the 2 buses, 3 buses parking outside, and then making a long queue to take photos. Not to do the toilet, but take photos, like touristic places. Well, it's okay, it's nice. The city government people are so pleased to do that. But then, after a while, of course, so many people, some of them, next stop is this toilet, so you can see there, you can take photos or something. So some people thought, wow, this is next stop is a toilet, so I like to do the toilet. Maybe it's a nice place. But then arriving, long queue for photo shootings, so they couldn't do any toilet. Then they complained to the government, city government. This should be the toilet. This should not be the place for the photo shootings. So the government should do something with that. And then finally, the government people put the mobile, movable toilet behind the walls. So I think this is the first time in the history to put the toilets for the toilets. So it's such a simultaneous funny stories. But I don't have time. I have a bit more projects, so I like to do it quickly. Another project with the boundaries.
This is a library of many, many layers of the bookshelf walls, like this. Because it is spiral shape, only one continuous bookshelf is making the whole libraries, with many openings. This is an important point. Like the house, box and box and box house. So you will see, you will feel the layers. And then those kind of layers make you feel, wow, something behind this wall happening, something happening behind this wall, something interesting is going to happen behind this wall. What is happening? Then you start to walk around. Because I like to make the library as like a forest of the books. Because of course you have to find some books if you need, but on the other hand, the library is a good place to just walk around without any purposes, to get some inspirations, to get some ideas, or to encounter with unexpected books. So those kind of unexpected feelings could be like the forest, I think. And then walking around almost infinitely could be the nice things, and then created by those kind of layers of the bookshelves. Finally, it's like this. So you will see how the layers of the many layers of bookshelves with many, many openings could make those kind of labyrinth-like feelings. And even outside, we have those kind of feelings. Inside, too, going up to the main floors with the beautiful ceilings, because it's made by the polycarbonate materials with the skylights, so it softens the impressions and it reflects the bookshelves a little bit more upwards to make more like a almost vanishing ceilings. And then you will see how the space is always vanishing or always layered. Next space, next space, behind it, to create such kind of expectations and invitations. And sometimes, yeah, most of you could understand how comfortable the space is by this woman. But actually, the space between these walls, two walls, is like a 4.5 meters, so it's really residential scales. So this is the interesting point of this spiral-shaped forms, because each space is defined by such kind of residential scales, divided space by space. But on the other hand, some point, you will feel such a really spreading, huge spaces. So small, tiny, cozy scales and almost infinite spreading scales, both of the scales and in between scales are coexisting together in these spiral shapes. That is like an important point, an interesting point of this form of the plant. An interesting point is you see space spreading, you see many layers, but you don't see which one is the last walls. Then it's almost like you feel it's almost like expanding infinitely. And you start to look around, then the viewpoint is different, changed, and then you will be lost in a sense, positive meanings. You'll be lost. You don't feel you are in the limited areas, but almost you will feel you are almost like in the infinite areas. And then in the evening, it's outside is coming out. And this was the proposals. We won the first prize in the competitions in Serbia, Belgrade, but the project stopped. But those kind of a spiral layering ideas expanded in such an unexpected situations, like the Middle East project. Of course, in this case, we didn't think they have money a lot, but still we proposed such a crazy things. It was in the Belgrade, alongside the river, and then between the river and then the heritage fortress, and connecting many traffic, different types of the traffic, river, ferry, taxis, water taxis, and buses, and trams, and the trains, and everything. So this is like the flow of many different things, we thought. And the space itself is not dead end, should not be dead end. Many things is coming in and coming out. From the fortress above, people have to come down, and then from the river, people come arriving. So those kind of flow is the key of the site, we thought. So we just translate those kind of site situations into the physical architectures, like this, connecting the different levels and connecting the different activities and the traffics, but finally creating the really strong central plazas in the middle. So everything is flow, but in the middle of the flow, we have like a central point where everybody can come together. So it has commercial areas, exhibition spaces, and the traffic terminals, and the cafes, and everything. So those kind of public programs are around all of those kind of central plaza like this. So this is just looks like just a pathway. Some areas in the middle of the bridges are inside, some area outside. So it's really urban central plazas. And then people can walk up. Of course, we have many shortcuts, so you don't have to walk 1 kilometer to come down. So this is so different from such a delicate treatment of the layers, inspired by the spiral shape of the library walls, but still it is like the continuity or consistencies of the ideas, but big jumps, big jumps. So again, if you meet with such kind of strange situations, you can be brave enough to make a jump. And then finally you achieve something strange or something new for you, but still you can still keep your ideas, because your idea is strong enough, consistencies. But jumping to the other stages is always quite exciting. Okay, so I have 3 more projects. Do it in 3 minutes. This is again the concept to translate or interpret the city as an architecture. So the city street could be an architecture. And then this is one of the proposals in Tokyo. We try to make such kind of 3-dimensional pathways together with those kind of stacked houses. This is the model, and you will see how the staircase is going up, and sometimes the people walk on the roof as a landscape and climbing up onto the top. So I thought in Tokyo, of course, this walking around the pathway is quite exciting, but it's pity you only walk 2-dimensionally. So I thought, what about walking on the houses 3-dimensionally to reach to the other houses? Could be very exciting experiences. And then it must be like a housing, small housings. We studied a lot, and then finally made it. The client was crazy, so he enjoyed this, and then finally it's done. And then you will see, it's a bit shrinked, but you will see how those kind of staircases bring you up to make it like the small pathway in the Tokyo is layered, stacked to create the 3-dimensional city, like this. And this one also like a stacked houses with the greens on it, because it is also nice to bring not only the houses but the greens to make it more 3-dimensional. Then you can actually see the pathways, alleys could be 3-dimensional. This is a private house. It's rather like a model house for the experimentations. So not for the specific client, but for the model house. But each small boxes, it's quite small. Boxes are small rooms connected by those staircases with trees on it. So it's like this. And some of the box is an outside box, some of them inside box. So going back to the previous ideas, this one, it's like the small boxes scattered. And in this case, in one side, we stacked them up. But still, it's divided with some trees on it. And then those small staircases are connecting together. So those kind of recreating the city-like situations into the architectures is always kind of full of the inspirations, because city is so different from architectures. So how to understand two different things in a contradictional situations, try to make integrations is quite like exciting and interesting things. And this is the last project I showed today. This is a project now in Paris. It's a huge project. We won the last year. The title is in French, it says 1,000 trees. And it's like this. The concept is like a floating forest, just above, right above the city of Paris. And as you know, the city of Paris has like the height limitation of 30 meters, 35 meters. So most of the houses, apartment is like that. So we thought, what about make a forest floating just above the city of Paris? Then it is quite visible, but it's quite harmonized. So something new, but sometimes harmonized could be there. The site is quite like special because it's alongside the Champs-Élysées, from the Louvre, Champs-Élysées axis. And at the same time, above the highway, the peripheric highways. This is a model. So you will see how the forest is floating. This is a highway, like this. And then we make the buildings a little bit like this, to keep the forest also on the ground level too. And the program is housing, office, hotels, commercial, kindergarten, and a bus station. So it's quite mixed. The lower part is a commercial, and then on top, of course, the housings. And then in the middle, we have offices and hotels, and so on. So it's like this. And I never did those kind of a strong shape of the buildings. But of course, as I said, it is because we like to keep as much greens on the bottom as well as on the top. That is why we make those kind of strange shapes. And of course, from the top, it has the many small houses. And it is also quite like a beautiful contrast because most of the houses in Paris is like an apartment, it's a big block. So we brought such a small houses, like the Japanese houses, on top of the greens. So small villages with a forest right above the city of Paris, floating. And this is the diagrams we showed at the competitions. So left hand is the Paris apartment. We open the bottom to make a forest to the public, and we transform the top one into the villages with a forest. Especially the Paris rooftop is quite like attractive. I have been interested in or fascinated by the Paris rooftop like this. This is the photo I took. It's the bottom of the city of Paris is really like clean and beautiful, but the rooftop is much more like up and down, and then different features and the characters are there. So those kind of diversities, the fascinations of the Paris rooftop has been retranslated into our small houses with many trees. So in here, of course, we met with the city of Paris, like a really strong context we never worked with. Then a lot of inspirations came out. And then how to make a harmony and contrast, what is the new things, but still should be really like respecting the city of Paris. So those kind of the contradictions, a lot of different types of the contradictions led us to make finally like this. And from above, it's really green field. Could be the green landmark. And this is the lower point of the public parks. The commercial areas on the ground level, but then we make those kind of the landscape where people can climbing up to the lower rooftops. And then you will see the floating forest above. So, the conclusion of today. Anyway, keep questioning, rethinking what it is, fundamental things, even in such kind of really basic things like walls or house boundaries or the functions, the chairs, furnitures. Keep re-questioning. That is quite like exciting things. And then be optimistic. Anyway, you can make it. You can get it. If you be optimistic, if you are questioning a lot, and if you continuing optimistic, you can get it. And be honest. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sue, for amazing and inspirational lecture. Didactic and pedagogical for students. So for that, I guess. I mean, my question is related to. I mean, I see such an emphasis in your work to the fidelity and loyalty to the original conceptual diagram. And I guess the question is, why most of the projects are white? I mean, is that a reason? I mean, is that part of the reason, or is just a Fujimoto-like kind of attribute of the work?
Yeah, actually, it's quite like difficult things for me to think about the color and the materials, because I don't like to make it white every time, but the white is really strong coming to me to ask you to use it. And yeah, some of them, for example, N house, box house, it has a reason to make it white, because it is relating to the reflections, it is relating to the layering. Then the white is making a really delicate difference in the colors, the ambient, and still bringing enough light by the reflections. But for example, house NA, for example, thin frames one, it could be, for example, different colors, or metallic colors, or red, or gold, or any kind of colors is possible. And the reason why I make it white is, I can say, it could be full of life, finally, in a sense. It is thin platforms, and it is more like how to say, architecture itself is stepping back, and the life is happening on it. That is a concept. But if architecture is really stepping back and you couldn't see it, that's a bit typical for me. So that is why I made it white, to make a delicate balances of architectural frames and the life could have a good balance. Maybe people can say it is showing the concept clearly. Part of that is true, but showing concept itself is not so important. To show more like such a balances of the life and the structures is maybe important for me. The same thing is happening in the housing in Montpellier. One of the reasons is clients likes to make it white. But also it's quite like white could be the beautiful background for the varieties of the life. And again, that project is more like showing the life. Life is the main part, and then the architecture is more stepping back. But if architecture is black, then it's too strong in a sense. So the white is, I think, the good colors to be the proper background.
Thank you. I think between here and Monterey, this is the best lecture. So my question has to do with the status of pixels. I think a lot of the work that you do is an aggregation or repetition of repeatable parts. And if I use the word pixel to think about this question, then of course we're talking about the status of raster images versus vector. And because when you say stuff like vector, you can zoom as far in as you want, and it'll be continuously fresh and clear. But then for a raster image, there comes a point when the unit becomes indivisible. And for you, I think there's the ergonomic tendency. Sometimes British people are bigger, or sometimes the client has a certain size of timber, which becomes economic. So sometimes it's ergonomics, other times it's economic. So which brings us to the idea that the pixel formulates a kind of indivisible part. But then I'm thinking more about the whole, which often for you is indecipherable, because when we think about pixels, we try to make an image, but for you, your whole often doesn't make an image, does not want to make an image. And maybe except for the Taiwan Tower in Taichung, which in plan it does make an image, but in elevation it doesn't. And so I'm kind of curious about because to me it seems like a very deliberate decision to create such mysteries, and I'm wondering about the decision of the whole, or the indecipherable whole.
Wow, it's also quite like every time it's a challenge. And at the time I finished the Serpentine Pavilion, I realized the size of the pixel and then the size of the buildings is quite like related, and we couldn't expand it, for example, 10 times from the same concept, because it's a huge numbers of the repetitions, too many numbers of the repetitions compared to the size of the units, and then finally it is not making a sense, or it is something like a different relationships is needed. So every time small units, middle-sized unit, and a larger size unit, and a larger things could have the proper proportions, I think. And in that sense, like for example, the classical architecture has such kind of meanings of proportions, has it, and it makes. I realize it makes sense in a sense. And then, for example, the Middle East project is quite huge, and we didn't think about subdividing those projects into such a tiny things. And we also didn't think about creating the shape as a whole by the pixels. So we brought kind of the shapes as it is from the local context, or from such kind of a meanings of the natural ventilation or something. So in here, I have to say, strange miscommunications of the pixels and then the whole situations are happening. And I am not so pure enough to be, how to say, for me it's okay in a sense. Sometimes, because architecture is like that, I thought. Architecture is like that. Sometimes, well, we couldn't put one continuous theory throughout the whole architecture. That is interesting point of architecture. Some different theories are intersecting to each other, sometimes relating to each other intensely, sometimes not relating so much to each other. But finally, as a whole, it is creating those kind of things. So I think that's the.
Thank you, So, for a great lecture and presentation. I have a question about evolution in your work and the working method that an architect has to have to think through a design, maybe not knowing what the end conclusion will be. And that as architects, we always have to have a working method before we actually see something to verify what we're thinking. And the thing that I've always loved about the Serpentine Pavilion is that it was this important evolution in your work from thinking about systems to creating a form. And that for people who may not have been there or have seen models or 3D drawings of it, it's this threshold in your work where all the systems of your way of working creates an enclosure and a form that's really unusual and unprecedented in the work that you've done. So I think Julia Peyton-Jones got it right, that it is like Fujimoto, but also very different. As you do bigger projects, and as you say that you can't use that same system because it doesn't scale, that there's much more liberty in your work of trying different kinds of forms. So the Belgrade proposal, the Montpellier proposal, and I wonder if there's a working method that you have when you work and do things that have very different forms, including the Mille Arbres. So I guess, is there a working method with these larger scale projects? And I wonder, does it have to do with this idea of protection and openness and a sense of the extended threshold of your work? Because that seems to be something that's present in all of those projects, but they take on many different forms. It kind of gives you a liberty to explore form without a system anymore.
Yeah, actually, after the Serpentine project, I felt I'm free in a sense, because probably it was the project I really intensely integrated all the questions I had, and at the same time, that was they had a scale, such a small pavilion, and around that time, I had more chance to do the larger scale project. And then I realized in a larger scale project, we can be more, we can get more information from the situations, context, or programs, or budget, or everything. And if you just like to apply one theory or one concept to all of those things, we will lose a lot. Not lose the competitions, but to lose the diversities or playfulness of the art. So after that, I more rather start from the basic researches of the project, rather normal, but the basic researches of the, for example, the local lifestyles, climate conditions, and in the Montpellier house, the shape also defined by the proper depth of the housing, because of the sunlight and then of course the money. All of those kind of things, we do the basic researches, researches. And then we start. But of course, from such a basic starting point, we can think about some crazy hypothesis of different way of the form, or different way of the planning, or different way of the proportions could make everything works more than the normal strategies. So finding those kind of new form or new way to realize such a normal things is one of the, in a sense, method of our work. So every time we start from the normal, but every time we try to find, if we do the normal solutions, this works like this. But if we like to do these opposite things or something different, how it works, how it fits to the situations. And some of them works better, at least for us. Then we test to do that. Normally several different ways. And then step by step, we try to find how we can develop it. And as a result, for example, in case of the last one, it is not the normal situations, because it started from how we understand Paris, or how we bring the new things to Paris. It is a little bit like they request something new, and something new means something not normal. But at the same time, we have to make a harmony with the surroundings of Paris. So, what kind of the relationships between the new things and then the traditional things, and what types of the combinations, what type of contrast could be acceptable but surprising, for example. And those kind of thinkings has been done a lot, and finally reached that. Of course, sometimes the client says, "This is a project." We make a talk with the developer, so sometimes the developer guy says, "I like this," something like that, and then we have to anyway go for that direction. So we have always those kind of unexpected, uncontrollable situations, but we have to find So, yeah, in that sense, we have a method, but we don't have method.
I have a question, and then I'll call for one from the audience. When I was thinking about your work over the weekend, in anticipation of your visit, I was wondering whether or not the desire for diversity of social behavior in the Japanese projects has any relationship to a kind of social critique. Because I thought that the way in which if you were to contrast a kind of traditional form of education against something like a Montessori method would allow for open-ended play, self-discovery, sort of freedom of choice. And from a kind of Western American perspective, visiting Japan seems so coherent that the kind of socialized behaviors are regimented. And that would follow something that would be, that's taught through traditional forms of education. So it seemed, I could be reading into it from my point of view, which hopefully you'll excuse me. But it seems like your love of leaving options open is a challenge to the kind of structure of Japanese culture. And I wondered if that's a kind of sleight of hand social critique that you smuggle into your projects.
Wow, yeah, I never thought about it. Because maybe I have been dropped out from the very beginning, from the Japanese society. So I never had to suffer some troubles by those kind of coherencies or, those kind of, I didn't get any pressures. That is why I never thought about do against that. But actually, yeah. But maybe unconsciously, I felt that and I tried to make it something different. But also I was more influenced by, for example, in my school days or right after the graduations, the concept of the affordance came to, it was like a boom. And then I thought it's something nice to think about those things to be beyond the normal functionality. So I was more, I tried to go beyond modern architecture, functionalism, or something like that. The reason why I showed the visual was like, so my anchoring point was those kind of really early modern architecture and try to create something like alternative or different. So in that sense, those kind of leading many options as a varieties, not defining the functions as it is, was part of that. And also, one more thing. It's interesting. I just thought during your questioning, in the Japanese traditional architecture, we have such kind of a open tatami space, which has like a multifunctional space or more functional spaces. And it is, and of course using sliding doors to be more flexibly used. So during my early days, I tried to re-understand what is the traditional architectures for our age. What is the meaning of the traditional architectures in a contemporary architectures, or something like that. So how to understand those kind of open field of the Japanese traditional buildings was maybe influencing to create such a thing.
I think Heather's question, in a way, is asking about the lecture series, and that the question about the social critique might be related to the idea of position, which for an architect to open a lecture and say, let me tell you about me, my background, is a way of saying, I believe in my life, that's my position, which of course is very much like you're a Go player and we're chess players. We need to line up something, we need to confront something, we need a paradigm to break it down. So let's say the idea of the territory of space is not ever, it's presented in relation to Le Corbusier, but let's say not like Mies, who theorized it as a project. Corbusier, in a way, wasn't so strident about that part of the project because so many other things came into play. And we're all fans of your work and would know that at some level we're sitting here filtering it through the kinds of questions that Heather asks, as opposed to just saying, well, this is you grew up in the country, now you deal with the city, and it's a one-to-one relationship between this is how you see the world. If it were only that, I might say I might not care about your project because it's your project, right? It's privatized, besides all the things. But I think the fact that you play it out, in fact, something like white, which is a polemical color, which I asked 3 years ago the same question, by the way. No, I've just lined that question up, of course, and Fujimoto-san said I try every time, but I keep coming back because that's the project that I need to deliver. I think maybe to universalize things, because if your stuff was all sorts of materials and colors, then it would spiral into some super private, really one-to-one. But I think the resolution of it is lets us all in, I think, to sort of your world, which is makes this, I think, a relevant conversation in America. But anyway.
Well, actually, yeah, it's true, and it's, of course, I talked about starts from the private background, and early works is really private, and I feel when I did such a 3 early works, it is really private because I didn't have any connection to the society, no functions, no commissions. But I felt, even at that time, I felt if I think about, for example, the relationship of the human body and the space, even only from my viewpoint, it is connecting finally to the international or universal situations because everybody has human body and the size is not so different. Of course, the lifestyle is different, but the interaction could be shared, I think. Or if you thought about the city and the house situations or boundaries, it is also like a universal, could be the universal interest, but how to say, try to redefine by my own way. So even the first, at the very, very early stages, those kind of private, but at the same time could be, I like to see the possibilities to be shared by many other people. And of course, afterwards, the clients is like the existence outside of me, make me feel, in a sense, comfortable to expand myself, my thinkings more socialized in a sense, or to make a good reasons, or to locate our thinkings to some positions in the world. And especially recent works is getting more larger things related to business or the urban context more strongly than in Japan or some things. So I am more relying on those kind of situations, more like a floating in the pool of such situations, and not try to swim by myself, but just like how to say, floating on the river and let them float, and still try to find something which people can share within that. So every time what I make is not what I like to make, but I feel it should be made, or it could be made, or something. But from my view, please.
All right, I'm going to draw this to a close so that we can all have dinner. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.